regular meeting of the City Planning and Zoning Board will come to order. Preliminary matters. Tim, do you have any?
Yeah, I have a suggestion, Mr. Chairman. Would it be, if it's okay with you, we have Vic Damati in the audience for the second. He's interested, since it affects the youth sailing project, to move that to number one, if that's all right for you, rather than hold that
have
first.
An issue with that? Let's come on up. We'll get right with you. Approval of the minutes.
I just noticed one change. We had a lot of people speaking to us, and I really did not catch all their names. But on page 6, I know there was a reference to the spelling being incorrect, and it is. It's Jack Berrigan. Last paragraph on page 6. G-A-N. Okay. And that was the only thing.
How is it spelled?
Pardon?
How is it spelled?
Berrigan. Berrigan.
Okay.
Any other?
And I don't know about the other names there, really. I noticed that there are questions about whether they were spelled correctly or not. I can't help that. I just know that one. Thank you.
Any other additions or corrections? As amended, I look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second. I'll second this.
It's been seconded and approved. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Well, I'd like to now open the meeting up for public comment. And seeing nobody in particular coming forward for public comment, we'll move on to the public hearing part of our meeting. And we request of Tim McGarry that we move item B to the first position. We all agree that that's possible, so we'll do that. So, Tim, if you'd like to make the case for the city on this.
Thank you. The Youth Sailing Foundation came before the City Council a couple of meetings ago requesting the city to revise the ordinance. They would like to put a 500 square foot office trailer or 400 square foot office trailer on the property, but the existing way the ordinance reads, and this was set up back in 2012 when we had to make provisions to allow the youth sailing to enter an agreement on the wastewater plant. We had to change the comp plan and the zoning to be able to allow them as an accessory recreational use to be on the property. In that ordinance, basically, we held any floor area to existing buildings of 3,700 square feet, which they, I believe it's 7,500 square feet, but they're in a 3,700 square foot building. Well, they're kind of outliving that. The youth sailing's been an outstanding success in the community. They're having to put new staff on. They've kind of outgrown their office facilities, and they really would like to have some temporary space. I mean, in the long run, they want to build basically a building, a boathouse for their activities and for their educational programs and on the property. But that's further down the line. But in the interim, they'd like to have this office trailer placed on the property, which they could use to take care of their expansion of staff and get out of their tight quarters they're in right now. So,
Tim, would you
yes,
excuse
sir.
me? I apologize, but I did not publicly state the proposed amendment, and I think I should do that if it's.
Oh, you didn't read.
I did not. That was my fault, not yours.
Yeah, I think we need to read the title.
I do. Forgive me. So I'm going to.
Well, I wasn't paying. I just zoomed along.
I'm going to assume that it was all my fault. Okay. There's a public hearing on proposed amendment to Chapter 62, Article IV-4M, Industrial Zoning District, related to permissible floor area for accessory recreational uses.
I suggest you really read what the agenda
item is on there.
Yeah, it's more. It spells out the ordinance. That's what technically.
An ordinance of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, amending various provisions of Part 3 Land Development Regulations in the Code of the City of Vero Beach related to permitted uses. I'm reading the wrong one. I read
yes.
A. So far today, I'm not real on top of it, but I'll go over and I'll get it right eventually. This is a volunteer job, right? Can't get fired. Okay. An ordinance of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 62, Article 4M, Industrial District of Part 3, Land Development Regulations in the Code of the City of Vero Beach related to permissible floor area for accessory recreational uses, providing for codification, providing for conflict and severability, providing for an effective date. And the number on this one is Z1600002TXT. I apologize for that, and I apologize for you, Tim. Now you can
No,
proceed.
that's all right. No problem. I'm not following the script very well myself, so it puts two of us in that. We looked at so we went through the standard review, the standards. It's always funny when we write the ordinance and then we go through and say that we're complying with all these things, But that's okay. The proposed text amendment is needed to allow the expansion of the floor area, as we pointed out. They couldn't be able to put the trailer on the site without this amendment, and therefore they would be hamstrung in their efforts to continue to provide this fine service to the community and its youth. The consistency with the comp plan is basically the proposed text amendment is consistent with the comp plan that talks about allowing small-scale recreational activities compatible with and subordinate to the existing governmental utility. It's consistent with the land development regulations. It provides a little more flexibility in meeting the needs on the property rather than holding exclusively to existing buildings. However, the limit on the amount of floor area is still the 7,500 for recreational, just to keep it the subordinate use. Now, eventually, and I can just so you understand, in the long term, when they decide they're going to build their building, we're going to have to do a land use change of some sort in there, because it's getting to the point now that that's becoming more of a use than the wastewater plant on that property, and it would be appropriate. So we'll do that. It'll be sometime after the comp plan has gone through and it's determined to be in compliance, which we're updating now. So unless you have specific questions to me, Vic is here to answer any use sailing things, but this, because this really fits only their property generally right now in the code. Unless you have some questions of me, I would either, if Vic wants to say, make it open for public comment, and that would be, Vic could come up if he wants to do that.
The only question I really had, do we have to reflect in any way that this is only a temporary situation?
Well, no, I don't think it's necessary. What is temporary? We've had enough arguments in transit residential about what temporary is.
I didn't want this to be tamed.
We will give it. We will just approve it as a officer, whether it's temporary or not. Does not. It's going to be there long enough, according to Vic, anyway. So it'd be hardly temporary.
I have two or three questions, Tim. Number one. As I understand it, the total buildings on the property, total floor footage on the property is 7,900 square feet? 7,500 square feet.
The 7,500 square feet is the limit that can use for existing buildings, but there is no space in any other existing buildings, which I should have brought out. It's in the report. So that's why they really have no other alternative. They're being used by the wastewater treatment, but they would have to build something.
And this is a separate building?
This would be a separate building from the 37. They would continue that.
Okay.
Yes.
And will the trailer be attached to the building in any way?
No, we have where the trailer, it needs to be worked out with the wastewater treatment with Rob Bolton, the director in that. I mean, they have some ideas where they like to go, but we need to make sure that the owners of the property are able to put it in, where they want it situated to try to balance the needs of both the youth sailing group and the city.
And we're also looking at the lease term too, because the lease premises that we have now may have to be expanded to include that trailer. So it's kind of a multifaceted situation with a lot of different moving parts.
But that's true, because it wasn't identified as an improvement in there.
Is the trailer unacceptable to put on the site? Is there any restrictions that might occur?
Well, there will be restrictions. It's going to have to be trailer meets the building code, or it's in the floodplain, so those kind of restrictions come in. My guess is they'll have to make sure that it's handicap accessible and a few others.
Okay.
And storm conditions.
Yes,
would
it'll
be-
have to meet that for these manufactured buildings. Yes.
Needs a little motor on the back so when it floats it goes down.
What about Homeland Security? Do they have any security?
No, the waste. It's kind of funny. Right now, the Homeland Security does not affect the wastewater plant. I guess they don't care about sabotage of the toilets, but they care about the across the street,
Right.
the power plant. But now the power plant, it's got a substation, so it's still a potential target for a terrorist. Yeah.
And we also have language in the lease that requires you sailing to tie everything down and hurricane-proof things in advance of a hurricane as well. So we've been working closely with them about making sure that if one comes in this next season or any season, that everything's battened down.
So the resolution doesn't have to take any of that into account. That's all there in the lease.
The ordinance, yes.
Yeah, that'll take care of it all, Lisa. And remember, they still have to get a site plan approval of some sort on this. And
That's a minor for you?
yeah, you're not going to see this. They also have other things that need to that we're going to be permitting, the docks and things. So that'll
Does
be
that
taken
come under
care of.
major or minor?
No, those are all individual docks under
okay.
that. But Peggy's right. The lease agreement, the area that's probably going to have to be expanded based on what actually is transpiring out there. They had access use to go out there, but putting improvements out there and everything, they're going to need more than that to have the lease agreement to cover that area.
How
And we're
long is
also-
that lease agreement now?
Is it Vic, 4 years? 5 years. And we're also working with the FDOT, and we've been working with the FDOT for a couple of years now, about the land that's underneath the bridge that's owned by the FDOT, and it's being utilized by the city and U Sailing and Indian River County Rowing for some of their equipment in a kind of a informal agreement that we've had with them over the years that we're trying to formalize at this point to give them formal ingress and egress, the FDOT, to their property under the bridge, because the only way they can get there is through city property. And that in exchange for, and in addition to, a lease back to the city with a permit back to U Sailing so that they can continue to use that. And U Sailing and the Rowing Club have already given insurance documents to the FDOT to protect the FDOT. So there are a lot of different things that are going on under there with these two fantastic programs.
And you realize U Sailing will be moving over to the McWilliam Boat Base.
Right.
Indian River Rowing.
Rowing?
Oh, they call it Indian River Rowing? Okay, the rowing club. I call it the Rowing Club. Okay, so.
We know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I believe that will be coming before you because they have outdoor storage of the skulls and things, so you will be seeing that.
I have another question about the trailer. The word trailer is a term that's used in a lot of different senses. Trailers on wheels, trailers on permanent foundations, etc. What is anticipated?
Well, this is going to have to be tied down to meet hurricane. It'll have to meet everything on an elevated trailer. So it's not going to have the wheels. It's going to have to actually be a physical building. They do that when you see the modulars for schools and all that. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And that's the building department that gets into those kind of issues. So I'm glad I don't have to make those. Sometimes I don't.
That doesn't have to be included in what we're doing.
No, because all you're doing a legislative action that technically affects any kind of property that has these, characteristics. So these are going to more site specific for an actual, development approval.
Okay. We don't have to reference impervious
No,
surface.
not at all. Not at all.
Any additional questions of Tim?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
A couple. And just for clarity, this is just for this site?
Yeah, technically it could be other sites, but there is really no other sites that fit this. So technically, yeah, you're
It's just
technically
for this.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
My next question, how many trailers or these type of office buildings can you put there? You're approving for just this one. How many can actually fit?
Oh, I don't know. There could be quite a few, not quite a few, but several at least in their existing leasehold area, but there's enough. You could put more on the property. I would have to get in to determine the third. We'd have to look at that, but I don't foresee they're doing that at this point in time because they really want to go forward and get donations for their permanent structure.
All right,
Yeah.
let's say for the sake of argument, they want to add another building. That would just come before you, and that would be something you could approve. Once this is approved, it doesn't have to come back.
Yeah,
to
generally in something in an industrial district like that, it is usually way under anything generally under 10,000 square feet comes to me, unless there's density and other things involved in it.
So if they wanted to add more of the property in their space that they lease will only carry so many units.
Yes, and then they'd have to have their lease would have to be amended because the lease does draw out what they can do. So
That's true, and that goes to City Council
Yes.
for its review. And
Okay. And right now they're under a 4-year lease, did I hear?
I believe they've got a 5-year lease, and
5-year?
we're looking to
5-year
renew that
lease.
right now.
Okay, 5-year lease.
Some of that has elapsed already, correct? Some of that has elapsed already.
Yes, they've been in there, Vic tells me, 5 years. Doesn't seem that long, does it, Vic?
5 years.
We've been in for almost 4.
Almost 4. Okay.
One other question, Mr. Chair. Mr. McGarry, when things happen on this site, this is all run through the Water and Sewer Director first. He takes a look at this, and obviously, if something can happen there, he'll let you know, right? So he's already looked at all this, correct?
That's how it's supposed to work.
Yes, he has to sign off on all the legal
He
documents that go before the City Council.
Before it even comes to this point, he's already looked at this.
This is just the zoning thing, but this office trailer, he's going to have to look at it and sign.
Right, and if it's not going to
application.
work for him or whatever, that's something he'll
And
work
that's
out
something
with you.
for them to negotiate between the two parties. I'm trying to stay out of it unless it's a
Oh,
code
okay.
Basically,
problem.
we're the
Okay.
the city's in a funny position here because they're the landlord here.
Yeah.
And they have to accept or approve what they're offering to their tenant, and with that in mind, they'll make the details of it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from something could be code compliant, but it wouldn't meet what the city needs
wants.
as landlord or the operation of the plant. That's why you can have a lot more say through these lease agreements and all that, and telling them just like any landlord.
It's just a comment, Vic. The school board has a lot of empty units right now. They're eliminating. You might want to talk to them about a unit. So it may be available for trailers.
I do have one. It's just a concern that someone's going to look at this because this is site-specific, yes? I just don't want it to be gamed in another way. And so I was looking at this saying, well, now, could somebody else use this to make a case for themselves? And
But that's true. I mean, basically, the Indian River Rowing Club is already there, so you do have two different. They're just not taking up floor space, at least not on city property.
yeah, that was my concern with this. Is there a way to make this so site-specific that nobody else could use it to game the system? Or
Well, I don't know how to game the system. If the city council has to approve all
Right,
these things,
yeah. But we're
the only
sending this to
gaming is
them.
lobbying in a political sense. You know?
Okay. I was just worrying about the wording.
Yeah.
That-
You're worried
that
about the
kind of-
regulations, that these
Yeah.
regulations might be used by, but look what they're identified to,
Right.
what kind of property.
I mean, in the
You're
long
selling.
run, we're going to come back and change the
Wastewater.
zoning and on that property, probably to something more like P2, which is a recreational zoning. I mean, that would be more appropriate. Not the whole property, because that wastewater treatment plant's not going anywhere. You've all heard the price tag on that thing. It's way over $35 million, and it keeps going. So I don't see that moving anytime soon.
Okay. That was my concern
And also,
with this.
just under the language of permitted uses, recreational uses compatible and in co-location with the city utility subject to.
Yeah.
I mean, anything in
Right.
co-location with a city utility is going to be public property, and if they want to use it, they have to come to us for either a lease
So that's how you
or a right-of-way permission or a use of city property by license agreement. And under any of those, as you all have seen over the years, we have insurance provision, indemnification provisions, and many other protective provisions for the city that our office looks at, that goes to the city council, that comes to you all. So there are a lot of different layers of protection in place.
I guess the other thing, too, this is going back where this you have it identified here as a trailer that's going to be put on this property, and it's industrial zoning over there right now. So this is a permitted use. But for the sake of argument, you have some other nonprofits that we leased out to that are on parkland. And for the sake of argument, and I understand what Mrs. Manous is talking about, you're allowing a trailer here in our parks now where you have your nonprofits, some of them renting. Could they put up as trailers also for permanent housing?
Hold it.
Industrial.
This does not say trailer. All this does is allow them to do floor space outside the existing building. They intend to do the trailer. If they may not end up with a trailer, they may do something else. I'm not saying they'll change, but we're not. And again, as Peggy pointed out, the city owns these properties. They're not going to want any tacky, bunch of trailers put in where they can. This is clearly temporary, and the temporary would be multiple years. You know what I'm saying? Okay.
Good. That's what I was looking for, the temporary word. Okay.
But it doesn't say that in here, so you just have to. The permit itself, we'll get into that.
Office trailer.
Additional questions of Tim?
But I was just pointing out.
Okay.
Any additional questions of Tim? All right. Does the applicant want?
We need to open
up for
to a
public comment.
Yeah, there were the applicants. It's just public
Right.
comment.
Anybody? Seeing nobody coming forward, I'll close public comment. Beck, you want to say anything at all?
Unless you have questions.
Okay. No, I do not. Then we're ready to look for a motion.
I make a motion that we accept staff's recommendation.
I second.
We have a first and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, then I will call for the vote. Yeah, I think so.
Mr. Cahoy,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillman,
Yes.
Mrs. Manous,
Yes.
Mr. Lawfer.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vic. My
And
granddaughter enjoyed sailing over there too with you. So
And continued success. Fabulous program.
okay, we're now going to revert back to public hearing and ordinance, which is designated as A. And this is an ordinance of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, amending various provisions of Part 3 Land Development Regulations in the Code of the City of Vero Beach related to permitted uses in certain non-residential zoning districts, providing for codification, providing for conflict and severability, providing for an effective date, and this one is numbered Z1600001TXT. And Tim, are you going to make the presentation on this one also?
Yes, I think
I don't see your staff helping you right now.
I was trying to scare him. Said, "I'm going to get back. Sherry, you're going to have to handle these." The staff prepared the attached draft that amends development regulations to establish a regulatory framework related to permitting establishments called microbreweries that produce beer and other malt liquors on site in conjunction with a restaurant, bar, or tasting room or combination thereof. The draft ordinance defines a microbrewery as a use and identifies specific zoning districts where microbreweries would be permitted. Prior to the RFP process dealing with the sale of the surplus property at the diesel plant, and before we selected the buyer, the staff had made a determination that the city's land development regulations need to be amended to allow a microbrewery in the downtown. And basically, the problem is that on-site production of beer by itself and small liquor is considered industrial use, which is not permitted except in our industrial zoning districts, which makes sense. It's not identified in there, but if you look at a definition what industrial use is, it's manufacturing, beverages, and all that. So the approval to sale of the old diesel power plant to develop and operate a microbrewery on the site necessitated the staff prepare draft regulations to address this permitting issue. In the past, or in practice, we've been able to approve small-scale on-site beer production, meaning where it's smaller, it's less than half the floor area used for the beer production versus the restaurant and all that. We've kind of done that. However, the volume on-site beer production and distribution off-site for sale to wholesalers or distribution associated with a microbrewery would make beer production, which is manufacturing, more of a primary use. I mean, you get down to the accounting, what an accessory is on sales, on distribution. It gets real complicated. The easy way is just set up the regulations to deal with it, and understanding that a microbrewery, it does have more of an industrial use than we normally allow in commercial districts. But I think it's a fine trade-off when you look at what it can do. And there's a lot of, throughout the country, a lot of communities have done this just because of the economic value of these and attracting citizens and residents and visitors to the downtown areas. We did review several ordinances from other communities. We also relied upon a publication prepared by the American Planning Association entitled Practice Microbreweries. This document identified issues related to permitting of small-scale alcohol production and the standards and criteria used by localities throughout the nation in regulating these facilities. So the first thing that we did, I'm just going over the summary of the significant components of it and go into some discussion. We did look at our regulations. It was determined that it was only necessary to amend the code to address microbreweries, not breweries or not brew pubs or traditional breweries. Brew pubs, and I classify the old Orchid Isle Brewery as one, which are typically associated with a restaurant component, are limited producing no more than 5,000 barrels per year, and are prohibited from sale to distributors under the Florida licensing. As such, they can be addressed very easily as a restaurant, which we've done in the past. There's no need. In fact, I don't think Orchid Isle even does 300 or 400 barrels a year. They were telling me, I was concerned when we were doing regulations we wouldn't be putting people in non-conforming status. So I did go around. The traditional brewery, like the Walking Tree, which is out in an industrial area, is not limited to any amount of on-site beer production. And so we didn't feel we had to put any. It's in an industrial area, and we didn't feel we had to put any on that. So it can be addressed as a manufacturing industrial use under the city's zoning regulations, and that's how we treated it in improving it. It was further determined that it would not be necessary to list microbreweries as a permanent use in any industrial district that allows both restaurants and light industrial uses. I mean, they're a given in those districts. I mean, they can combine. They would be treated different. They would not have to meet all the requirements of microbrewery anyway, even though they may act like a microbrewery. It only made common sense. It gets a little crazy in there, but if you're in an industrial district, you got a lot less criteria involved. It's not necessary to. But in the one of the industrial districts in the airport district, there is a multi-commercial district. There we allow microbreweries because those type of uses are not supposed to be industrial, even they're under a listed industrial classification prefix before there. I mean, I don't know who made up the zoning for that airport, but it's a mess out there, and I'd like to get back in there to clean it up to be more consistent with our other zoning, other than some of the airport facility functions. A definition for microbrewery is proposed in the text. Basically, it limits on-site production to 15,000 barrels per year. That's the licensing thing. That's a typical microbrewery. It's both in the licensing and the industry standards call those microbreweries, up to 15,000. There are some cities that allow larger ones than that, but I think it's safe to put it in 15. And in talking to Michael Richter with the Integra Group that is negotiating the purchase from the city, they'll be up to 10 to 12,000 in a few years, but 15 would be the maximum anyway out there.
But they brew off site then if they go beyond that and possibly bring it in at that point in time, right?
I don't think they're going to go beyond that, according to them. We would have to look at some sort of either sometimes you're right, a lot of these smaller ones will brew off site where they can, and then they can bring beer in, so which is fine. The requirements on the minimum amount of fluoride devoted for public use and the maximum limit on the percent of fluoride to be used for brewing function ensure that the microbrewery will have a commercial component. So those are set in there. The definition prohibits outdoor use and lists other types of storage that are prohibited for aesthetic, and public health reasons. However, there are certain outdoor activities or storage that is allowed, and they're specified in there. And let me see, just to get back in the, and those are things like, let's see, and they're not put under the, they're not in the definition. They're back in section 6410. Which deals with performance standards. I had to put it back there because those standards did overlap, and I wanted to be sure. Somebody said, well, wait, you don't allow this back there, so this would make it more consistent. And basically, like fermentation tanks, bright or conditioning tanks, and grain silo associated microbrewery may be installed on the premises outside the microbrewery building if approved by the Planning and Zoning Board or Planning Director. So basically, the one coming up for you, these are usually aesthetic. They're done aesthetically with the building. You'll see a silo out there. I figure there wouldn't be a problem on that kind of thing. We don't allow it on smaller and less intense commercial districts. Now, the one thing about this, we're picking on one site. These people are not only have to go before you, but they got to go to the HPC. So this thing is going to get a thorough review. So it may not be easy to do some of these outdoor things. We just have to see. But the design would have to fit the building, and it could be backed by the railroad tracks and all that. So.
You all know that this is on the National Historic Register.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's going to go through all sorts of reviews.
That was when you're into the area now, right? My biggest concerns is the historic preservation. They have override of whatever the decision the city council makes, even, or is it voluntary thing?
You look at your approval. What? Okay, so it's a thing. It's a combination approval. But when it gets to the historic, anything that affects the historic nature of the building, they're going to have
say so.
But that doesn't mean the city council. In the long run, the city, it might be appealed or it will stand. I mean, this will be one of those areas that we have to look at. But certainly, I would lean on the HPC's recommendations if they don't historically meet. You would look at things like, does it, where it's located, does it affect the
That's what I'm
the
concerned
site?
about.
Yeah. So there is some balancing there, but you have
through in site plan.
You have to take into consideration what they're doing. See, they have to give a special certificate for this, so they have a say. Really, probably more to say on the building and those things that it may override something you want because it doesn't fit in there. I want to be honest about it. We've not had this
first time
happen. It's the first time, so there's going to be a learning curve for everybody. And Peggy and I will be involved trying to figure this out. Okay.
And it's a good thing for the new potential owner as well, because it's a good thing to have a National Historic. I mean, that's a selling point.
Sure. It is.
And it's a beautiful brick building
beautiful
that I'm sure they don't want to do anything that would disrupt that character.
They paid a lot to get that building.
They're going to get the building. They're going to put 2.7 million. I think they're putting 2.7 million of renovations or something. It's a big number because they got to be able to build parking, lighting. They're talking about an outdoor beer garden. See, all that has to fit together.
Have they worked with this historic preservation yet?
No, they're very aware of it. They're very aware of it.
We don't need their input at this point in time, do we?
No, but I would. No, we don't need their input at this time. But they have to get that special certificate from them,
right?
And that would probably come before you. If there comes a real problem. Normally, the staff will review this thing to make sure it meets code. Mm-hmm. Okay, then it will come before you, and if you could do changes on it as long as it isn't something that affects the historic thing. And if there is, we'll work out what it is. I can't remember if I've got that in my code. You're asking me questions I didn't really get into.
Okay.
But I just wanted you all to be aware this thing is going to get really scrutinized. So.
Oh, with historic properties,
Yeah.
it sure will. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an additional question. My concern is I've seen several of these in my lifetime, and they're significantly different one from another.
Yes.
And there was no continuity. If you say you've seen certain type of stores, you've seen a lot of them, okay, like banks, for example. But in this case, some of them had very industrial look to them, and other ones were more cozy in nature and et cetera. And if you take the worst of the industrial ones, where they had a big commercial, where they put the grain in a big thing up on the roof, like, and
Well, no, yeah, that won't
I didn't
work on
understand
that thing, but they have a grain silo toward the back of the building or something like that. I mean,
but we don't need something that detracts from the building, from
they
the
have
street.
to, and it is industrial, so what they show
Okay.
has to be kind of match industrial. But you're right, that would detract, in my opinion,
from the site
building.
itself,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
our community, okay, and
Yeah.
and I like the premise of what we're doing, but it needs to be subtle, and it's
Yeah.
instead of in your
Well,
face type.
let's don't get too bogged
I
down.
know,
on what they're
I
gonna do.
recognize where I'm going,
Okay, and just let me go over the definition. I have the definition of 15,000, 3,500 square feet of the floor area shall be maintained for public use as a restaurant, including tasting area. No more than 75% of the floor area should for brewery function. And then I identify all that. And no outdoor storage should be allowed, including portable storage units, cargo containers, and trailer. Cargo trailer. That
And that
was pretty
includes,
tacky.
and that includes the commercial operation they're having. Everything will be stored inside?
Yeah, everything in storage site. The only thing would be these outdoor structures that there's pre-production storage. And that's what we were just talking about, like a grain
Okay.
silo.
Right.
Okay? All right, we also then went through and looked at what commercial districts would fit this. So you can see, starting at 6235, the district, which is the commercial districts, we decided that the C1B and the C1. The C1B is like where the Miracle Way shops are.
Okay.
The C1 is the highway commercial property all over the city. You notice we didn't put it in C1A. It's a limited mixed use. We thought a microbrewery would be a little too big for that. We're limiting all sorts of things in that, from retail and all that. So it really doesn't fit into
It
that.
doesn't fit there, right?
Brew pubs like the Orchid Isle fit in perfectly. And B1 is more of that's closer to most residential areas. We didn't think that would be appropriate to have it there.
Could be
we,
odors.
We limited it out of prohibited from those two areas. Under the development guidelines for the airport, we allow it under the AL1MC, which is their mixed commercial district, which fits in there. And the airport's working on some changes to set up a central commercial area and all that. And so there are probably going to be some land changes that we're going to have to do with them in the future as they're working on their master plan. They're also doing, I'm just bringing it, this is not germane to this, but I might forget it. They're also doing a habitat conservation plan because they're looking at making changes to all that conservation area out there. You know, where particularly where the potable water wells are and all that. The FAA has been on them. Why is this land not being marketed? No money's coming back. Why are you doing this? So the Habitat Conservation Plan is basically looking at endangered and threatened species, and you have to do certain things. It's basically a taking thing, meaning it's basically you can kill so many of these endangered species as long as you don't threaten their vulnerability. Having gone through this in the Keys with the key deer and the marsh rabbit and all these other little critters, it's a grueling process, I can tell you.
If your mic is on, can you put a little close to you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're dropping out.
Okay. Good. I said things people shouldn't hear. All right. And the second one, the other area that we did was the downtown district, that we just added that to that. You'll see that's 30 in the downtown district. So that covered it all. We didn't put it in industrial district because it's the same thing as I explained before.
It is acceptable. Once again, it is acceptable in an industrial district.
Yes,
right?
acceptable. That's right. So
And
it's
that
no need
includes
to get-
having a restaurant attached to it.
Oh, yeah. You can have restaurants. That take care of the brew pubs. And if you want to have a microbrewery, which has a industrial, we just handle it under industrial. You want to make these things as simple as possible. But you want to be sure those areas that could have some offsite impacts are covered, and that's how we did it. So basically, that was what we proposed in the justification for it is, again, the staff thinks that this would be this kind of microbreweries are a very good attractor for economic development. It's been proven throughout the nation. Many of these are being placed, particularly in mixed-use areas, and it could be a very important catalyst for our downtown and mixed-use development.
That's
and
true.
with the cultural village that's been proposed, I think it all is kind of synergistic kind of thing. And we have not had real significant investment in the downtown. I mean, all the changes in little restaurants moving here, doing that, it's not the same as coming in with this kind of an investment. So that's the kind of thing we need, that maybe you get other investors interested in the downtown, and that's what we really need down there. As to consistency with the comp plan, it provides little or no guidance, typical comp plan. However, the Objective 3 does call for establishing and maintaining land development regulations that protect the community character and are compatible with adjacent development. We feel that the other uses in all these zoning districts are permitted this are very compatible and have been. And there is one policy is to reinforce downtown as a mixed-use employment and governmental center and unique cultural arts, entertainment, and residential enclave. Shopping and dining opportunities to support the district and surrounding neighborhoods. And again, pointing out, allowing a microbrewery will have a positive impact, we believe, on the vitality and continued enhancement of downtown as a mixed-use district, and it'll help draw both in locals and out-of-town visitors downtown in the proposed cultural arts village. And it's consistent with the land development regulations I pointed out. So the staff is recommending your approval and submittal to the City Council for their favorable consideration.
Is it fair to state that City
And just
Council...
point out, it will take 2 public hearings for the City Council, because anytime we change permitted uses in a district, you have to go through that. So you have a first reading, and then you have the 2 public hearings. So it takes a little longer than some ordinance.
It is fair to say also the City Council requested we do this. Is that correct?
No, they did on the first one we just handled on the youth sailing. They didn't say that, but they clearly understand.
It was a 5-0 vote, though, wasn't it?
Well, it was a 5-0 vote to get it, but they understood during that it would need a zoning, they had to change our land development regulations. They didn't direct us to do that. We told them that was going to have to happen, and nobody stood up and said no over my dead body or anything.
And
so.
plus, they have entered into a sales contract with Mr.
Yes.
Riker for this property.
That
Yes.
shows some...
And it would cause some real problems with the sales contract. I mean, I've worked with Mr. Rector on exactly what they needed to make sure it fits into this ordinance.
I was at that meeting. I think the City Council understood this is the next step. It just kind of flowed. I mean,
think
and
you're correct.
they already know that.
Refine it, yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a question, how it's, fitting and being compatible into that area. What kind of landscaping is going to be required?
Well, our typical landscaping. Most of our landscaping it's either going to be the landscaping that you got trees requirements that have to be on site. On linear, you also need to have landscaping for the parking areas, and then some open space. There's landscaping, so it generally fits that. Now, whether he's going to go over and above and beyond that, it's very likely.
Because it's industrial area, so we're applying industrial standards to this site. And they're less stringent than others. Is that correct?
Well, it's industrial, but the downtown is a
overlay.
No, the downtown is different than
Next.
Industrial. Okay, and there's certain requirements, but there will be. I mean, we had a plan that was done when I guess the tenant were still having a lawsuit over. They had to do. They had a lot of landscaping, other things they had to put on the property. Some of the areas of the property have to continue to have pervious surface because of the there's some leaking going on. Still, there's some groundwater pollution, and that's part of one way to get rid of it. You don't allow any rainwater or any water to get into it, and so some of those areas are kind of covered by that. So we would certainly push to have landscaping done, and I think that's what they want to do. They want to make this. They want to make this a centerpiece, so it won't be. I don't believe you're going to see just the minimum landscaping to get by in the code. I mean, I can't guarantee that.
Well, the only thought I had is it's going to become a permitted use now in these other districts. Will you require the landscaping to be, compatible with those other districts? That was.
Oh, yeah, the landscape, they'll have to meet all the landscaping requirements at a minimum.
Like the airport and the downtown and.
Right, they'll be similar to what we have, right. The downtown's a little different because of the way a lot of the downtown buildings can be up closer and all that, but this building's further away, so we will certainly work with them on appropriate location. You'll have an opportunity to do that. I mean, when they come before you.
Yeah,
What do you do with the railroad? You got the railroad.
Well,
right
there's
behind
not a lot
the
you can do with the
property.
railroad.
Pardon me?
There's not a lot you're not going to do
Can't
much with that
there.
railroad, except
side of
it'll, you know.
Is that building very much on the property line?
It's close
The
to
right
it.
of way at the railroad?
It's close to it, yeah. In fact, that was one of the when we were looking at the Amtrak from Jacksonville down that was hit all those cities. That was one of the possible station locations.
Yeah, I recall.
Yeah.
There you go by.
If you go by and look, they have it staked out, and the railroad right-of-way is right up against their line. And I think most of you know, they have 100-foot, the railroad out there, 100-foot right-of-way. I have a question. The ordinance?
Yes.
On page 3, 64.10, site plan review and standards and conditions. This is the ordinance I'm looking at.
Oh, I'm sorry, the
that you-
ordinance. Okay,
that's
page
going
3.
to go before the council.
Yeah,
for
page 3.
approval.
Okay.
Under the development standards, you talk about that. I mean, that's great. And you talk about the situation coming before the P&Z people. I think that's great. Could we put in there, if approved by planning and zoning board and planning director? So it's out in the open.
Well,
for
no, the
everybody?
only reason I did it this way is because we've done it in other things. Certain site plans will only need my approval. That's why you do it this way.
Oh, I see.
That's what. And so if it's a major site plan comes before you all, then it's approved by you, not me. Okay?
Because I was concerned, since you're talking about the tanks and all.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the P&Z would see that if they.
Yeah, and that means you have to approve it. It was just
I know you have or planning director.
Yeah, and I've done that before where we have when I do minors, you guys do majors, and that was the intent there. I've never had anybody bring up what does that mean? I mean, I could add some language to it depending on the threshold. I could say for major site plans or planning director for minor site plans.
That's
You want me to do that? That's
good,
fine.
because that way. it
Yeah,
keeps
well, I
everything
was
out in the
thinking
open.
of that when I was doing it, but I got away with it before, so I left it in there. Okay, so I'll put that in.
Thank you.
Questions of Tim?
Tim, question. For clarification on the Walking Tree Brewery,
Yes.
is it currently limited to 15,000 barrels?
No, it doesn't have any
No limit.
limitations,
No limit.
unless there was something in the lease agreement, but I doubt it.
I
forgot.
don't remember.
Yeah.
They have an SBA loan. In fact,
Yeah.
their production's supposed to start next week.
Oh, wow.
They're a tenant out at the airport.
Yeah.
And that's strictly wholesale?
No, they're going to have.
No, they're going to have a somewhat of a tasting
Yeah.
room, as I
Yeah.
understand it.
Okay. Question number 2, have you considered the wholesale activity that will take place on this site, and will that require dockage and trailer access and the like?
Well, that'll be during the site plan review. We didn't get into the specs on that. The amount of production they can do is going to limit a lot of that. But that's something we'd work out during the site plan process. See, the problem is we're dealing with a historic building here. It might be totally different. You know, most places depending where they have to have like the dockage to there. They don't want trailers left on site. So
Right.
when they dock up, the doors can be open. They can't leave them open until they close them. Some places set specific time limits on that, but I think that's something we get into the site planning process we'll look at, because that can detract from it without coming up with the specs.
Because there
here.
could be dockage.
Yes, yeah. I mean, when they bring in things, so I think that's something certainly would be addressed during the site planning process. Without coming, it'd be nice to have specs, but so many of these buildings are different. I didn't want to get into. Yes,
Instead of trying to adjust the ordinance to what the sale conditions may be a way, because it's a one-time thing. Maybe we could adjust it in the sale conditions that we identify certain things that are not run with the land, because it's an individual parcel. It's historic. Is there a way we could handle it that way, as opposed?
Well, I don't know if that complicates it more to get sale done. I know that we do have. There's going to be a requirement for at least 5 years. It has to be, or some covenant will be on it that means you'll have to do it for 5 years of this use.
Well, my only concern was that if it's an industrial site, and I think I didn't think that whole way through, that he could convert it someday to the building remaining constant, but making it more of a wholesale type sale. If his, just say that particular brand he had took off, we could have trailers parked in there and et cetera.
Well, no, if he he won't be able to put trailers and stuff. We've already, that's a verboten under the definition. And if he makes any change of uses outside the lease, he's got to follow that lease agreement. And he starts doing things that that the commercial component starts disappearing, then he's got to meet those commercial components. Then he's in trouble, because that would not be.
So that's
then it
locked
becomes more of a flat out brewery.
Okay, that was what I was worried about.
Yeah. Now, whether people are going to try to get around that, you can do only so much. I think what we're trying to do is stay away from somebody has to give us receipts, how many barrels are being sold to the distributors, how many are doing this. I mean, that, and then there are going to be people that will be able to come and buy and take a growler in there and take it out. So you'll have those sales. I mean, it gets to be very difficult to administer that. And so we try to make it as simple. That's kind of what going through all those ordinances and looked at, I try to pick the best of both worlds. But this will be a new experience for us. I can't say it won't be.
Do we need to do any attention to vehicular traffic on the property or on and off the property, or is that all going to be site plan?
That'd be site plan.
Okay, we have
all
no responsibility at that point here.
Yeah, right now this is just a legislative item to put in there. Okay.
A question about outside storage. Most of the microbreweries that I've seen, the fermentation plant tanks are on the inside of the building. But I'm assuming, since this is an historic building, they don't want to modify the building, so they're requesting outside storage.
Yeah, well, they're asking for that. Now, I'm not, to be honest with you, when I talk to, I hate to be getting this like one site we're looking at again. It's like the first one we just did. And this one could fit in other places. So, but in talking to them, they felt under phase 2, and I'm not so certain phase 2 is more activity on site, that they needed to have those because of our limitations on the property. I don't know, but I wanted to make sure. I said, look, I don't have necessarily a problem with that, but we need to have some control over whether you can do that or not. Okay, and that's why we put in those.
Well, that leads into another question. We don't have any limitation on the numbers of silos, tanks, and conditions.
Well, see, then we're getting into site specifics, and we don't know what they're producing, what their level is. I think we have to look at it from a site plan. Does it detract from the site plan? Does it detract from the historic resources? Those will all be site plan things. For us to come here and set those right now, I don't think we even have. And none of the ordinance I saw got into that kind of detail. Okay?
Yeah,
I think they're going to have to justify what they do on these outdoor ones, and in particular, I want to see how they aesthetically fit into the site and to the building. I mean, I saw some pictures of some look fine, but some just may not work. Now, I didn't go into what the criteria is here. I kind of opened that to give us more authority or discretionary authority on that.
The limitation of 15,000 barrels has some advantage.
It will, and that's what we put it in there.
So many
Yes, you can only produce so
Fermentation
many.
tanks out there.
Yeah, and they do have a state license, so the state does keep track of all this, or will have a state license. I'm sorry.
Questions? Any additional questions? I guess we're ready to call for the question since the applicant is a city. Okay.
Have
Do
we
we have
already
any
opened this for
public-
I'm
public
open for
hearing?
public discussion. Anybody like to speak on it? There's several people out there. We'll give them one more second. Okay. We'll close public comment. Ready to, I'm looking for a motion. Is there additional discussion before that?
Motion to approve staff?
I have a motion to approve staff's recommendations. Do I have a second?
Oh, with the amendments
With the
proposed
amendments?
by, yes, those amendments have been added.
Okay.
Repeat the amendment?
Pardon?
What was
Identify
the
the
amendment?
amendment.
The amendment was that in G, 6410-4G, we're going to add in the last paragraph, if approved by the planning director and zoning board for minor site plans, or the planning director for minor site plans. Is that good?
Got it.
And we could say plan approvals. If you don't mind, I might add that. if
As
I-
amended, is the correct your norm?
Correct, as amended.
norm- As amended.
Second
have a
the
second?
motion.
But I think it covers it.
I'm sorry.
I second the
We have a
motion.
second from Ms. Hillman. Any further discussion?
Yeah, again, I think this is fabulous. I think, I'm very pleased with this coming forward. I'm just, again, I don't want this to be gamed, And have we looked at this is there going to be, we don't say that this is site-specific here, do we?
No, it's-
It
Yeah,
can't be.
yeah,
Can't be.
yeah.
One other quick question, and this is just for the record. Is there, Mr. McGarry, this is for you, is there protections, let's say this thing really works, and we all hope it does in a positive, do we have to be concerned with any type of smells from the site, especially if they start doing full production? Are
No,
we covered?
It should be all covered. That's one reason you have a lot of the production stuff inside the building.
All right, so we're covered.
But if we're having if there are problems with that, we would come back to the owners of this.
But it's an industrial area, Tim. That's pretty difficult, isn't it?
Well, this one's downtown, but there may be ones industrial areas. That's true.
This is in the downtown, and the reason I brought that up is it could become a very large facility. It could be sold to someone else down the road. So we want to make sure the protection's in place because, let's say, for the sake of argument, it starts producing smells that are very unpleasant for the rest of the business owners, and then it starts permeating into the surrounding neighborhoods. So it's something we need to think about.
Well, and it's a good point you brought up. Now, remember, when on the site plan thing, you do look at odors are one of the off-site impacts. So the applicant needs to address that as part of his application, how that's controlled, okay?
Yeah,
So I think that would take care.
We're covered.
It should, okay?
Yeah, those were like the visual, noise, waste, all those things.
Exactly.
They're controlled by other codes, and they'll come forward
Yeah.
on site plan. Okay.
Further discussion?
Are there any security, because it's alcohol, are there any security things that we should be looking at? Any protections?
From a zoning
Yeah.
perspective?
I don't think so. We have alcohol all over the place. We're one of the leading bars.
Yeah. Oh, I remember
Location.
when we went through that
In
marijuana ordinance. Okay. Yeah, I think this is, hope it works.
Hope.
Yes, for the owner.
We ready to call the question?
Mr. Cahoy,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillman,
Yes.
Mrs. Manous,
Yes.
Mr. Laufer,
Yes.
passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Fry was out of the room when we got to the public comment part. I was just wondering if we could open up public comment and let her speak. Did you want to speak?
Would you like to speak, Ms. Fry?
Thank you so much.
You come forward. What is your topic?
Zoning, planning and zoning relevant to the Florida.
Okay, well,
Well,
please come
yeah.
to the microphone. Forgive me. I just thought maybe it was on the thing we just finished, so.
bring my easel today, but I'll hold it up for you better when I get to that part as well. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Please give us your name and
Public record. My name is Phyllis Fry. I reside at 275 Date Palm Road in Vero Beach. And I want to thank you all for all that you do. You've been good stewards. We only have to look outside to see that. Appreciate all your work. And before I get to the subject at hand, I did give Peggy a packet for you that has the latest on All Aboard Florida, which came out yesterday at the County Commission meeting. I don't know if you have this information yet, but what it consists of is a letter that we've been trying to get hold of for 4 months and finally got it. And it is the letter from the FRA to All Aboard Florida saying that your safety plans do not meet the minimum requirements. Also, there's information there inviting public comment. We have already started the process of asking for 30-day extension, and the deadline is May 2nd. So if you want to engage your community in this, it would be of help. So I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll be as quick as possible, and it's about the future planning and zoning changes that are slated for our city and county under transit-oriented development. This may be a familiar term to you, it may not, but I would like to explain. What is transit-oriented development? TOD is a real estate and transportation package that is backed by the $65 billion Fortress Hedge Fund and its subsidiaries, some of which include Flagler Land Holdings, All Aboard Florida, and Florida East Coast Industries. I believe we're pretty safe in saying that All Aboard Florida has been anything but transparent in their dealings with us who live along the Treasure Coast when it comes to their negative impacts and intentions adverse to our communities. It was only when the grassroots efforts drilled down into the corporate and financial structure of Fortress that the truth was brought to light, and we're still drilling. For 4 years, I attended the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meetings, and I debated the CEOs and presidents of All Aboard Florida and FEC, including FDOT, while they were initially bringing their plans for All Aboard Florida to the council, and I debated the 750 teams who plan to re-engineer the future development of our communities. It is important for you to know that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is no friend of ours. I will give you my 4 years of experience to your benefit on that. They fully supported the All Aboard Florida project. Indeed, in December, a letter of 2014, Michael Busha, Executive Director of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, wrote an impassioned letter to the FRA stating, quote, "The All Aboard Florida project will help encourage mixed-use development and redevelopment that enhances the preferred form of infrastructure that encourages higher density population and intensity of development," end quote. I wonder who this is preferred by when they say preferred. Bear in mind that in 2012, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council also supported and promoted the central planning scheme called 750, a 50-year redevelopment plan for 7 southeast Florida counties that would determine where and how we live, where and how we build, bypassing local governments, and again, thanks to the educational efforts of the grassroots campaign, 750 was voted down in Indian River County, in Martin County, and St. Lucie County. I'm here today to talk about why and how this all ties in and what the end game is in terms of development, the future development of our county. In 2014, at a University of Miami Commercial Real Estate Entrepreneurial Conference, Vince Signorelli, president of Florida East Coast Industries, stated, quote, "All Aboard Florida is a real estate play that will allow us to move our portfolios into urban areas and improve our assets under transit-oriented development," end quote. Let me repeat that. All Aboard Florida is a real estate play that allows us to move our portfolios into urban areas and improve our assets under transit-oriented development. At that conference, Wesley Edens, founder of the $65 billion hedge fund Fortress, explained how they overtook Miami's historic district through zoning changes to allow mixed-use development, increasing both population density and building heights. The developers demanded new codes that allowed for retail at ground level and 600-square-foot apartments and high-rises above. Under transit-oriented development promoted by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, a few affiliated developers will manipulate and dominate the real estate market within 1/4 mile on either side of the FEC rail corridor from Miami to Cocoa. Cocoa has already taken the bait and ended up having to change its city charter, relinquish control of existing planning and zoning rights to comply with TOD's visioning plan that included 150 rental apartments at 650 square feet, an increase in building heights to 45 feet, and this is just phase 1. The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council's website under Urban Design and Town Planning and Design Charrette says, quote, "Master plans have been prepared. Design guidelines, comprehensive plans, and traffic calming means new codes have been recommended for implementation," end quote. It's important for you to know that the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is not going to present to you their final end game to our community and our planning department. Why? Because they know it would be rejected outright. That is why they arrive under the guise of transit villages. New urbanism, smart growth, walkable, bikeable, breathable, planet-saving, etc. This is phase 1. Small, seemingly innocuous changes to planning and zoning, comprehensive land use plans with small gradual increases in density and height will be presented to you using pretty pictures at their design charrettes until they've convinced enough people that this was their idea in the first place, and all of this on the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council website and the 750 website. Do your homework. FDOT's website also includes the plan for TOD, so it's all working together. The regional planning contracts are very clear. Direct quote, "The RPC Executive Committee will be the overall governing board, will approve the overall work plan, recommend the selection of staff and consultants, provide policy directions for the regional vision blueprint and implementation plan, and provide technical assistance, and develop a toolbox that will assist planners in modifying their local codes," end quote. Not only will they expect you to accept their plan, the funding for their project will come from grants or taxpayer money. All Aboard Florida proposed, just like All Aboard Florida proposed, as you recall, the RIF loan. And by the way, they have come back to the RIF loan now since the bonds are not selling. So this is all part of a taxpayer-funded project. They want to do this to us with their own money. But there's a smorgasbord of other grants besides HUD grants, which it was the last time the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council came with a $4.25 million HUD grant. But there are other grants that have terms and conditions, and I have already presented to the City Council to scrutinize those grants, to understand what those terms and conditions are. So our only recourse is to refuse the grants and not allow these urban planners to come in and implement the plan. But they are as clever as All Aboard Florida because they're one and the same, and it's all being driven by Fortress and its group. In closing, this is the vision. This is Fortress's vision for how they think we should live. This is a rendering, and All Aboard Florida's rendering of Fort Lauderdale. This is going to be their rail hub. They specialize in centralizing around the rail hub.
We can't pick you up if you don't speak into the microphone.
The two 80-foot towers with the 600 square foot apartments in them and office buildings as well. I don't think this is the vision that we have for Vero Beach. If local businesses think they're going to benefit or survive this, think again. Mom and pop's business will not be able to afford the upzoning and other stricter regulations. They'll be consumed by a handful of Fortress's preordained developers and will be transformed into a community that we do not want. You are our last line of defense. I urge you to carefully examine with utmost caution as changes to our planning and zoning rules are incrementally being nudged out of our hands. Listen to what Commissioner Peter O'Brien said at the last Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting. From the minutes, O'Brien noted that at the Florida Association of Counties Legislative Conference in Tallahassee in early February, the most disturbing issue is a coordinated effort to remove home rule authority from counties and cities. He indicated there are 21 bills floating around that have some form of preemption in them. He noted a couple of representatives who were locally elected officials who spoke to the Tallahassee group and expressed the same concern that there's an orchestrated, coordinated effort to remove home rule of rights. Transit villages and art villages, there's nothing wrong with them. I support the arts, and I think it could be a very beneficial thing for our city. What we have to watch is the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, the steady incremental changes that they will bring, and the terms and conditions of the grants. Guard our planning and zoning rights. Do not allow them to be legislated or romanced out from under you. These people are cunning. We have what they want, something they've run out of in Miami, developable land. And if you think the vision in this all aboard Florida rendering could not happen here, think again. It is happening here, and you need to withdraw from any further visioning plans that moves us in this direction. I've also provided you with a copy of that, and also the document sources. I also have given you a copy of the Affordable Furthering Fair Housing Rule and how it will affect our community. It's a 377-page document, but I chiseled it down to about 10 minutes. And also the expanded presentation I gave to the city of Vero Beach and the county commission offices as well. So I believe, Sherry, you have those. And if you have any questions, my email is on there. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Sherry can give you all
Or
copies.
I'll
of
scan
that.
them and email them to you,
Okay, that'd
because
be
I just
better.
have the one. Okay.
Are there any other planning department matters, Tim?
Yes. Just want to say that I'm working my way through the land use policies. You know, they're a little tougher to try to cover all these, but I want to make sure everything works together. So once we're ready with that, I'll come before you. And we also have got a draft housing policies we're almost done with. Our approach on housing policies, let's put it this way, we're not pushing active intervention in the housing policies. I don't see us doing that here. I never get, for affordable workforce housing. We should address it, but some communities go into very active modes for that, like creating accessory housing in single-family neighborhoods and all that. I think we're going to try to work around in our multifamily for infill and stuff to make housing that would be compatible with existing patterns without disrupting. A lot of our neighbors are historic. We certainly don't want to mess with that. So that's probably more of our approach. So it's one of those things. I don't think the state, under the old days, they would have probably made a big deal out of this, but I think we have to reflect our community. You'll all have a chance to give me your 2 cents worth when we get it going. So, but I just want you to be aware of that. So other than that, we're still moving away. I just get disrupted all the time with different things, so it's unfortunate. But so it could be a lot quicker, more quick.
Well, one of the things that we as a P&Z board have to be on the constant lookout. All of us are out in this community. We're here for the reasons that we are. It's a great community. I'm in the construction business. I've been around development all my life. And it's called you're ripe for development, you're ripe for redevelopment and infill. What we have to watch here and where they start is with your height, where you get challenged on your height, or they try to weasel in when you start developing some of your industrial land as far as, well, go up a few extra feet. That has come to my ears. Well, what's 2 more feet? What's 3 more feet? Once it starts and they erode your charter, then you got problems. The other thing we have to watch out, too, and this is development. I'm not talking about residential homes. I'm talking about commercial development and infill, is the density on properties, especially when you allow a lot of build-out on the property. You go out to the lot lines, you have to be careful. You also have to look at the landscaping. If you look at how we've done things over the years of why a lot of people have come here is for the landscaping and how we protect our community. So going forward, we're right back. I don't want to say we're back, but if you were here maybe 10, 15 years ago before we had the crash, things were jamming. And this little city was under pressure. The same thing with our county. So that's something we all have to be on the guard. And it also make sure You have the proper elected officials in place because they're the ones that do the policy. You know, the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, when you go back and study some of the history on the train, it was the elected officials that opened the door. Go back and look at some of the voting record. It wasn't the staff. Staff takes direction from the elected officials. So that was quite an interesting read that I did a number of months ago of how all this got started, and we're stuck holding the bag here in this county, in this city, with this fast train coming through. Thanks.
Any additional board member matters? Seeing none, call for an adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you.